Please welcome the panel on The Future of Mobility, moderated by Executive Director of Fortune Live Media, Diane Brady.
Hi, everybody. I'm suddenly noticing my photo for the first time, going, yeah, it needs work. There you go. Thank you very much. Very good to see all of you. This is for your questions afterwards, so you'll be able to, we'll take Q&A from the audience. Let me first introduce my panel. I'm going to go backwards because, of course, I've got it now in a different order. We have Shauna McIntyre, who's CEO of Northvolt Qbert. We also have Éric Martel, who is the President and CEO of Bombardier. Andrew Littlefair, is there a Bombardier? Bombardier's in the house. Andrew Littlefair, who's President and CEO of Clean Energy. Okay, who here from Clean Energy is going to? Okay, good.
Thank you.
So we're going to just, and then we have Stella Li, Executive Vice President, BYD, and CEO of BYD Americas. And last, certainly not least, Pablo Di Si, who is CEO of Volkswagen Group of America. Okay, you know what? I like Volkswagen. I'm going to clap for you on that. We're going to start with a lightning round. I think anytime we talk about the future of mobility, we should first level set. What are we talking about too much? What are we not talking about enough? I'm going to reframe it a bit to just ask each of you quickly to start with, what are the biggest pain points you see right now in getting us from here to where we want to go? I'm going to start with you, Pablo.
All right, thank you, Diane. So the biggest pain point is this transition that we're going through in terms of electric vehicles. And we have, at the same time, investments in electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and combustion engines. So you have all this technology at the same time with conflicting legislation in the US, and we have to live through this phase. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. The future will be electric, but the transition, the pace going through, will depend on consumer behavior, whether they want the vehicles or not, and primarily infrastructure. One thing that we should be talking a lot more is about renewable energy. Because if the future is electric, we should have more renewable energy in the US.
And I know she slipped regulation in there. If there's any regulators in the House, please stand up, because that's, I know, a topic we're going to be talking about a bit. Stella, how about for you?
Yeah, so on our view, we believe like future mobility is electrification. There's no backward. There's no chance for the ICE car in the future will still survive. So, but in the future, we think is BEV and the PHEV combination will really deliver the whole solution. Now the big challenge in different countries, then you have some country lack of government like a policy to support that direction. And some country, we have policy, but we don't have enough charging infrastructure. And some country, like here, government gave different opinion. So it's very confused to the OEM, confused to the like a consumer. So I think China did a very good job. They are very solid from day one. And then 10 years ago, they mentioned they want to start to pushing electrification. They start giving incentive. And now incentive is gone, but now is every activity was led by the like a policy. And then the consumer start to have a lot of experience for electric car. Then they enjoy the electric car. They buy the electric car is not because incentive policy now. It's just because it's high tech. Then it's a cool car. It's a very high performance car, high quality. So in Q1 in China, EV penetration is more than 40%.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah.
How about for you, Andrew?
Well, Diane, I kind of come at it a little differently. Our focus is heavy-duty transportation.
Yep.
So a little different than the light-duty Stella was just speaking of. And I think there, the policies that we've seen has kind of been a one-size-fits-all, right? It's the electricity. And when you talk about heavy-duty vehicles, that has some challenges. Mm-hmm. And it may not be the best technology. Because if you're not concerned about practicality or duty cycle or ease or reliability or cost, it can be very challenging. So I see that today as the obstacle. We're really focused on renewable natural gas for transportation, which we think can address where we want to go,
methane.
But not necessarily, that's right, capturing methane and not necessarily just being wed to a battery. So I think the policy needs to evolve a little bit over time.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a motif I hear when I speak to people. Eric.
Yeah, I would agree to that there is no, one-size-fits-all solution, clearly. In aerospace, I'm heading a private jet company, Bombardier, and, we spend probably 90% of our R&D budget, into figuring out solutions to reduce emission. Some of them are like, it goes from reshaping, changing the shape of an airplane to reduce the drag. And we have, nice initiative that are going to reduce it by 20%, which is significant. But I think that the biggest opportunity we have right now is sustainable aviation fuel. And sustainable aviation fuel, we can talk about it a bit more later, but it's really a solution that exists today. There's no R&D to be done. There's just need to be the policies and the willingness to have the fuel available in big quantity. Today we have about enough to do not even 0.5% of all the fuel that airplane would need. So a lot of work to do, but clearly the policies needs to evolve to stimulate, investment and make it available. Because if it's available on airport, then we can pretty much neutralize, the CO2 emission from an airplane.
Yeah, I was reading about how limited the supply is right now. I think within a week, basically, it would all be used up. So we need to have a lot more of it, and that's
absolutely.
Shauna.
So I'm taking the perspective of the development, technology developer. So at Northvolt Cuberg, we do lithium metal battery technology. Excuse me. And Northvolt itself is a lithium-ion battery producer with a $50 billion pipeline order book with $15 billion in equity and debt raised already. It's a tremendous company focused on sustainable battery production. Today, our battery carbon footprint per kilowatt hour is a third of what it is globally on average. Our goal by 2030 is to be at 1/10. So we have a substantial reduction in the carbon footprint. All of our factories, our gigafactories, are powered by 100% renewable energy. So, but my issue from being on the technical development side of advanced development is the fact that hardware takes a long time. And I'm inherently impatient, and when I see a great technology, I want it to be in the market immediately, because we can push boundaries when it comes to electrification. We can reduce mass substantially out of today's batteries and propel a new set of opportunities for electrification. An old boss once told me that hardware is hard, otherwise they'd call it easyware, and that's exactly our problem.
Software is soft, right?
Soft is soft, soft is easy, but hardware is hard. Yep.
So I want to get to the fun part, especially because this is an audience too where I'm sure there are people looking for the investment thesis, the catalyst, the levers. Where do you see the greatest opportunities, or you can even phrase it to sort of what is most exciting to you in the near term?
I think the most exciting is looking at the innovation and technology that will come through the industry and from other industries into our industries. I think it's fascinating what's going to come on battery technology, whether it's through critical minerals or renewable energy, why not? I think it's going to be fascinating to see the US being transformed in more solar, more wind, and having all the power grids being renewable within the next 5 to 7 years. So I'm really excited about that.
Can I personalize it a little bit from the context of Volkswagen and your role as, tell me about what, in terms of your own priorities, anything you would want to say in terms of what personally excites you in the near term for your company as well?
I think that the transition that we're going with electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids is quite exciting. Also, playing a role in the infrastructure, we have a company called Electrify America, which 100% of the energy going through the system is renewable. We have one of the largest solar panels farms here in the state of California that gives renewable energy to all the vehicles of VW and the competition. So I think that's quite exciting, and I think we're just in the infancy of expanding and going through more infrastructure, more renewable energy.
Great. How about for you, Stella?
Yeah, I think the cell phone and like a tablet industry used to be the innovation center, but now the innovation center is the auto industry. So actually, maybe some background, BYD, maybe 80% of people already use BYD product. If you use pad or phone, 1/3 of smartphone were produced by us. I was a former CEO for BYD Electronics division. So at that time, it's an innovation center. Everybody talking about what's high tech, what's the future technology there. But now it's totally different. It's in the car industry. Like during Beijing Auto Show, you will see, you go there, it's on like an innovation center, innovation show. Because everybody, doesn't matter which OEM, talking about has better, maybe precise vision technology to help for auto drive. Then they have a maybe new sensor technology to cut the cost down, and then you can enable to have the maybe more like a LiDAR or maybe AUB, all the technology into the car to make the car is become more intelligent. So, and everybody knows, like for the car industry, the first half is to do electrification. Then the second half, we already start now, is to do auto drive. When you do automatic driving, you need a lot of technology from vision and the better camera, better software, and then you need to have a better sensor technology. So when you're talking about sensor, it's not only LiDAR, radar, and also camera, but all kinds of sensor you need to detect in the high speed stuff moving around in the storming weather. You need to still be able to identify it's a storm or it's a human. So this is also you need a fast, quick calculation. And then also talking about mapping, you need to have a very precise mapping. And then so all this kind of technology become auto industry become the hub of innovation. So we believe that
a magnet for the best and brightest. That's the nice thing about being a hub for innovation.
Exactly. So this will bring a lot of investment opportunity all the way to the supply chain, to the software, to the chipset, all the way to the integration company.
Right.
A lot of opportunity to invest.
So, Andrew, you mentioned methane earlier. I know you started the company, T. Boone Pickens, in '97, I believe. What's on your radar you'd put on ours in terms of your priorities?
Well, we've pivoted, Diane. So we were a fossil natural gas.
Yep.
So we were replacing diesel fuel in heavy-duty trucks. And today, 91% of all of our fuel is renewable.
Right.
So it's either coming from landfills or dairies in our case. So we're actually harnessing methane that would otherwise go in the atmosphere. So I'm very excited about it. I mean, I think here is a very good example of renewable. The good news is our customers want to move to a sustainable fuel. So now, we're dealing with some of the toughest customers around, right? These are truckers, and they are interested in decarbonizing. And so I think it's
Why
realistic.
is that? Because it's the right thing to do, or
Their
cost?
customers and those that they haul for, the shippers. Procter & Gamble doesn't necessarily own trucks, but their customers want their product to be sustainable. And so, there's probably 7 to 10 billion gallons of renewable natural gas to be had, and so we're at the infancy. So I see a lot of investment that'll go into this. The interesting thing is, though, and you kind of think, well, that sounds like a niche. America uses 40 billion gallons of diesel a year and 3 million over-the-road Class 8 trucks. 7 billion gallons of renewable natural gas is as if you decarbonize about 60% of the diesel fuel. So there's just a lot of great opportunity, and a lot of money will be spent and saved because it's an effective way to decarbonize.
So, Eric, you mentioned sustainable aviation fuel. You've also been pivoting the company in some new directions. Tell us a little bit about what's exciting for you there in terms of the growth as well.
Yeah. So if you think about sustainable aviation fuel as a solution, so we can extrapolate the solution. But I think what's important to understand is, you do this fuel with plant feedstock, basically. Think about corn or something.
Yeah.
And we often hear about carbon capture, and there's technology being developed, but Mother Nature has figured it out a long time ago, because that's what it is. You have corn growing, and you basically capture all the carbon as you grow, and then you burn it on using the fuel after that, and it's neutralize each other. So everything you burn, you release it after, but the whole cycle is neutral, and that's exactly what sustainable aviation fuel is. So today, as I said earlier, 0.5% only of the fuel for the entire aviation. Aviation represents 2% of all emission. Private aviation is much smaller, it's 0.04, but still, it's part of the 2%. So we are trying to push very hard, but we need policies to do that. Like in a lot of area, we need the fuel. It's a bit more expensive, because there's not enough investment to do
So
that.
incentives or subsidies?
We need probably incentives, subsidies to get it going. Eventually, I think when the distribution is there, it's going to take care of itself, But I think at the beginning, it needs a bit of a kick and investment to get going.
Okay, Sean.
Thank you.
So in terms of innovation, what I think is important to me is the innovation and the inherent recyclability of what we do. And that I'm an engineer. I've been an engineer in engineering companies for over 25 years. When I started my career, it was about design for manufacturing, design for assembly. Today, it needs to be designed for recyclability. And recycling needs to be core and inherent to every designer's mission as they develop a product. And that is core to what we do. And the impact is substantial. To be able to recycle a battery, we can reduce the carbon footprint of that battery by a substantial amount, by, as I mentioned earlier, 1 to 10 versus what today's batteries are. And that's critical. That plus all of the sustainable, energy production we use for our own plants. It's part of the core mission of the company is to be sustainable, and so then the recycling piece is a core tenet to our development, and it sometimes makes it more challenging, but the outcome is that critical element, and it's quite important.
So sustainability is always a theme when you talk about the future of mobility, and I see one of my colleagues in the media here was pointing out, and it's true, we don't get a lot of the legacy automakers as part of the discussion necessarily. Yep. And what is it's like 1.5 billion cars on the planet. Certainly it's almost 1-to-1 in the US right now. What does sustainable growth look like for you? You mentioned all of these balances around the infrastructure for electric, obviously, fossil fuels not going away. How do you manage that? Give me some sense of just, as you're looking at the growth trajectory, what's realistic?
So I'll touch on 3 points. The first one is going forward. As you make more cars that are electric or plug-in hybrids, obviously you're going to reduce the footprint. And that, we have a clear strategy until 2032. We have all the product lineup, so we're in good shape as Volkswagen here in the US. The second one is how do we include the whole ecosystem? Because in the automotive world, particularly in a legacy, for every job that I create in my factory, I have 10 jobs in the ecosystem. So how do I push this CO2 reduction through my dealer network, through my suppliers? So we're working hand in hand with all of them to reduce the CO2, for example, having solar panels and all the dealers so they reduce the bill of electricity or eliminate the need of the grid. So that's the second push. The last reflection, which was mentioned before, is it will take 20, 30 years to transform a fleet in the US. The penetration here for electric vehicles is only 7%, and it's going flat quarter over quarter this quarter. So you're going to have...
Why do you think it's going flat?
Well,
people don't trust the technology, the
no.
infrastructure's hard.
Yeah,
where's my charging station?
The market is flat despite all the discounts from automakers, right? And that makes you reflect on what's going on. And what I hear from the dealers, from consumers, is the anxiety range and the infrastructure. So you will need time to go through that transition. And that's why I'm not so much focused on one technology, is to giving customers different options, and they can choose as long as we can reduce CO2. And the third option is we're going to have a park of combustion vehicles for a long time, 10, 20, maybe 30 years. And I'm a firm believer in biogas, in biodiesel, in bioethanol. So all these technologies that let you reduce CO2 from gasoline by 60%, 70%. So I think the combination of all three pillars will take us to a better world.
So we don't have to vilify the traditional auto.
And one size doesn't fit all.
Right.
Work with all the technologies.
So, Stella, you don't actually sell into this market per se with BYD, correct? And let's talk about geopolitics, because one of the things I really welcome about you being here is we talk a lot about what's happening at the political level, not as much about the innovation going on the ground in China and how you're selling to other markets. How has geopolitics impacted you? I mean, this is an opportunity to also talk about what you're seeing in the US market and also how it's impacting sales around the world.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's a big impact. And also, it's not good for US consumer, too. Because one thing is, doesn't matter what's your political position, but all the human beings share the same planet. For climate change, it's everybody's responsibility. Doesn't matter you have a different position, different country, we need to work together to find a solution for that. That's like a fundamental. So, and then, but we did not see like a still good construction, maybe a solid way to work to that direction. So we hope maybe after election, everything will back to normal. People will be more solid thinking about what's the future solution here. And then second point, in the past maybe 20 years, because the China government is always stick to several angles. One is boost the industry for manufacturing. Second is many really believing for the climate change. It took a strong action and a strong policy. In the beginning, a lot of money to do electrification. So it's demonstrate very big success. Like they start this incentive in the beginning, maybe 15 years ago. Start with buses, electric buses, and then taxi, and then like all this, like pushing the policy to build the charging infrastructure. And then initially the incentive they gave to passenger car is $12,000 cash. So manufacturers have to collect from Chinese government, but the consumer get a benefit. But now, and then that's make the EV penetration start with like a 0% to maybe 5%, and then in maybe 10 years, and then from 5 to 10% within 2 years. And then after that, from 10 to maybe 20% in 1 year. So now it's like we saw last year, the average EV penetration is 32%, but in Q1 this year, it's reached to 40%. 40%. But then this kind of very solid, sustainable, like a clear policy, help to have several results. First is consumer-driven, market-driven. So a lot of people build up charging infrastructure. So if you go to China, at the airport, at a hotel, at every place, you will easily find like a public charging. Yeah. And then second is you like actually boost a lot of innovation. The hard investment now in China is really everything related with the electric car.
Can I ask one question? Because I think especially for this audience, we've had situations where, ByteDance and TikTok, people have, that's been banned. We've got issues around how Huawei's been perceived, BYD. One of the perceptions people have is if you're dealing with a Chinese company, you're dealing with the Chinese government. Is that a fair perception?
It's not fair. It's not like a true space. Yeah.
Right.
So I think like a TikTok is totally like a consumer driven. Right. Then they put their database in with Oracle. Right. So U.S. company. So I think this charge, even President Biden used TikTok. So why they need to ban this one? It's against Constitution for the people's free speech, free to use. And the second, then Huawei is a different case. That's different, right? But then for BYD, and we are the industry, we do the car. So this is, in the end, is consumer choice. So then if like a BYD is a global company now, every place also, like we have a very high standard for ESG requirement. That's the most of private company driving for EV is because ESG, top standard. And then we have the top standard for CSR. And then BYD did not run business in Russia, in Cuba, and Iran, Iraq, because we don't want to position us in some area is sensitive. Then we follow. Then we really well position BYD is a global company, and make our brand is more like a high respect, admire brand in the industry. So, but currently because of political, maybe some lobby or like other very complicated base, make U.S. is no longer become like an open market. So this is why U.S. is strong, because we're open market. All the smart people come here to compete, bring the best product, benefit all the consumer. So, but now I saw like U.S. become very protect market. It's not a benefit for the industry. This one not to help the
protective a market. What do you think, Andrew? Do you think it is? I'm putting in the hot seat. You can talk about
I don't think there's any comparison about what you're talking about in China and the U.S. market, so I just...
Yeah, no, I know, but talk a little bit. I mean, you mentioned policy earlier, but especially
Right.
the conditions
I-
for
I-
success.
I struggle with the fact of these policies, mandates. You know, the United States has had a long history of mandates don't work very well.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting ready to see, and we talked a lot about it at this conference, if you've been at some of the environmental sessions like I have today, everybody now is pivoting to one size doesn't fit all and on and on. I think what we're all understanding is because someone proclaims that it's going to be an electric battery, that may not be the best technology. And you'll start seeing some of these policies crumbling under their own weight.
If I put you in
We
the
need
driver's
to set, I think everybody here would agree, we're all up for the challenge.
Yep.
We need to have performance standards. For instance, the fuel that we're putting in a vehicle, in a bus, it's 5 times less carbon than a battery.
Mm-hmm.
It's cheaper. The bus is cheaper. The fuel is cheaper. So why shouldn't that be the right answer?
So I don't think.
And I think just one,
Sure, sorry, go on.
one last, and I'm not, look, it's going to be all technologies, right?
Exactly.
And so I'm not saying that it's not going to be the battery. I think there's.
Yeah, them's fighting for
But I'm
for
saying
battery
there's
mix.
plenty of room. Like today, I remind people it's 98% diesel. All right, so there's a lot of room here for everybody. But there are some examples of not mandates, not policy-driven federal mandates. For instance, California has a low-carbon fuel standard, and it's fuel neutral, right? And it has driven down carbon by 20% in California, and it's not a tax-driven program. It is requiring companies that are polluters to buy credits. I get that, but there is a cost to cleaning up the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're starting to see other states adopt that, and that would be a success in the United States. Right now, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Michigan, others are looking to adopt the California standard. That would drive lower carbon.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. We've already had questions come in, Eric, and one of the first places I saw you speak was actually at an AI conference. And when I think about innovation, there's a question here about advanced air mobility. You know, is that, any thoughts on that? Is that realistic in the next 7 to 10 years? But I do want to get back to also the pivot of, you know, where you're doubling down on defense, I believe, the aftermarket, selling these sort of pre-owned aircraft. Talk about where you see the greatest opportunities for innovation, because it's amazing to get through a panel and not say AI. I don't think we can escape without that. How is it figuring into your world?
Yeah, there's quite a few possibilities using AI in aerospace and aviation. The first one, we're using it more for, you know, our own productivity and things like that. Like, I'll give you an example. At Bombardier, we've developed AI to forecast spare parts. So, you know, our forecast, you know, we have like 30 model of airplane, 5,000 airplane flying. I can get, there's about 60,000 to 100,000 parts on every single airplane. I can have any part number being called elsewhere in the world at any time. So we have, you know, we're measuring ourselves to perform within 24 hours to deliver the part to customers. So our forecasting system is extremely complex. We've used AI. If you look at AI also on airplane, we could have, you know, AI eventually on airplane to modulate, you know, the fuel consumption, you know, to make sure that depending on the wind, depending on this, instead of having just a pilot, you know, doing that, to minimize actually fuel consumption. So that could be an opportunity to also. But if I may, I would like to react to something. And
Please,
Pablo,
no, jump
Pablo,
in.
you tell me if I'm going to talk about car for a minute. You know, I'm not a specialist. You are. You tell me to shut up if I'm saying something not true. But I understand that just the United States is targeting to have 300 million, you know, electrical car eventually. I don't remember if it's by 35 or 40, but that's a lot of car. But the elephant in the room is that I don't see, you know, unless I haven't seen it, there's no plan to get the grid capable of doing it, okay? So eventually there'll be a bottleneck, okay? And if the electricity comes from coal, electricity produced with coal, then I don't think we've achieved anything. So I think there's a need, when we were talking about policy earlier, to align. Yeah. So my ex-background coming up, but clearly, you know, if a million of car needs 3 terawatt hours of energy, so if you're talking 300 million car, that's about 1,000 terawatt hour, which is 25% of what we're producing in the United States today. So eventually we'll need, to grow that capacity by 25%, more electricity, but it needs to be clean electricity.
Yeah.
And then clean electricity source, it's solar, it's wind. I know nuclear is controversial, but that's
Yes, it's
the
source of
cleanest
energy.
source, actually.
I want to go
Yeah,
to Sean
so-
next, but you want to say something?
Yeah, let me put some color on that. So, that's exactly what's going on in the US market on electric vehicles, which is a great technology, but why do you get the consumers pushing back? We have Electrify America, as I mentioned. We're going through the 5th generations of Electrify American chargers. When you talk about generation 1 and generation 2, some of them, they don't work. So we need more capital deployed, we're changing them. And then the other point is what you mentioned. You may have the latest generation, but then you don't have enough power going through the system. So this is a matter of time and investment. I think the US has the right policies in place, but it will take time.
You think the U.S. does have the right policies
Yeah,
in place?
the Inflation
That
Reduction.
feels like news right there.
No, but the
It's
Inflation, no. The Inflation Reduction Act, looking
Yeah.
at renewable energy, looking at infrastructure, is the right place with the right vision, but it will take time. I mean, you're not going to create a new power grid and new renewable
When you
energy.
talk to utilities and already with AI, the power needs there are pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
Stella, you wanted to say something?
So,
I'm gonna go to
yeah,
Stella.
actually, I think for US, we're missing the most important technology is PHEV, which is PHEV. It means like on the battery range, minimum is 50 to 100 or 200 mile per charge. But then you have a gas, and then can run like a long distance. Because this is, we are the expert, we are global leader for the renewable energy car. So we see every country, the first majority adoption will be PHEV. People will experience their EV, the first one is PHEV. And then after that, so after several years driving, they build up confidence, then they have a charger, they know how to charge the car. So then the new replacement, 70% will buy the EV. So that's the US is like a one step to go to the BEV. I think that's missing. If we have more PHEV model be available, this will accelerate the adoption. Then second point, like Eric, because BYD is one of the player for solar panel, battery storage. We think you do have a lot of solution for electricity, is just a decentralized generation. And then we have the US is a big resource for the like a rocket gas and also CNG. Andrew, you mentioned this one can be decentralized mini generation. For that is more effective. Yeah. And then plus in California, that everybody knows in California we have very strong action for the climate change. So by 2035, all our generation need to be renewable generation. So
I don't think that's going to happen.
now it will happen, but because of why? Because you have enough solar, you have gas generation, they have battery storage. So like if you deploy a lot of battery storage.
Who agrees? Raise your hand.
But just see the data about California.
Just because the state said it doesn't mean anything.
No, but the reality industry showing that the data.
I'm going to go to
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Okay. Emotions are running high.
All right. Well, there are a lot of discussion points that are happening up here. One is clean energy, right? And the ability for the grid to be robust enough against EV. I think by the time that we have real EV adoption en masse, there is a natural pressure on the grid to actually improve itself. So I would assume that there will be more money toward the grid. I think one of the biggest issues about vehicles today, though, is that the automakers, and with all due respect, I think VW is probably an exception here because you've done a good job with getting into the user experience. So many times you get into these vehicles and they throw technology at you without actually understanding how you want to receive that technology. I've been commuting in an EV for over 5 years, and I never have to worry about charging it because I do a round trip, and every other day I charge it at home. It's never a problem. And so if we get into the use case of drivers in terms of if you're using it for a commute, well, then you don't have to worry about your range anxiety. You don't have to worry about charging it up. The long-term vehicle use, and I agree with you, Stella, about the fact that the plug-in hybrid is a good stepping stone to full to full electrification. In the US, we use our vehicles for road trips. We tend to go on that family trip to Mammoth from here if you're an LA person, or maybe it's to Tahoe from the Bay Area. So you do have a longer requirement for range. That's when I think there are a lot of different options. So to your point about lots of different options, I think back to, before our time, there was one, if you wanted a soda, you got Coke, right? If you go down your grocery store aisle today, how many different flavors of water do you have? Of Fresca do you have? Of
That a good
So
thing?
there is a
The
proliferation of
paradox of choice.
options. And so I think by democratizing technology and being able to actually bring new technology to market faster, more efficiently, we then create more options. So, we talked earlier about aviation. I absolutely believe in synthetic fuels. I think that is an important place to go. I think the industry's looking at a lot of different options, and there are a lot of companies looking at electrifying or hybridizing the airspace as well, designing your fuel efficient, your internal combustion engine, excuse me, that is potentially fueled on synthetic,
Yeah.
but you're using another form of powertrain at different parts of that drive cycle. So that's what I think is exciting about the world of mobility today, is the proliferation of
Can I
technology.
turn the spotlight on you a second
Sure.
with regard to the evolution of the electric battery? I mean, what's happening with, the density, things like that? Give us a sense of when you look at the innovation taking place in your own product, how does that change the equation?
Sure. So by removing
Energy density, I should have
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
Excuse me.
So by removing the graphite, our technology is such that we use the cathode. The battery is basically anode, electrolyte, cathode. And the cathode we get from our parent company, Northvolt. We have an electrode that basically, it's a liquid electrolyte, so it can seamlessly use the manufacturing process of our parent Northvolt. But our anode is special, and that's where we remove the graphite and make it more power dense. And by doing this, we basically have the power density, the energy density of solid state batteries, but with the manufacturability of today's batteries. So we have 50 to 70% more energy density, which is kilowatt hours per kilogram. We also have a charge rate that is very unique, and so that way, that is what's capturing the interest of a lot of aviation players. But it's enabling new use cases. So if you think back to that SUV, road trip to Tahoe, or road trip to Mammoth from LA, road trip to Las Vegas, wherever you want to go, you do want that longevity, and you do want to pack in more battery power, but you run out of space, and yet, frankly, they're just too heavy today. So we enable expanding the frontier, I would say, of electrification.
So, Andrew, I want to get back to you because you had some points you wanted to make, and then I didn't give you a chance to make them.
Oh, no, that's okay, Diane. I was just trying to, I think the power is going to be the problem. And I come at it from the heavy duty, just for fun. So there's 3 million heavy duty trucks in America. Mm-hmm. Every 500, you need 2.5 power plants.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So for 3 million trucks, it's not going to happen this way, but just you need 6,000 more power plants. Traditional natural gas-fired power plants. So we've got a lot of work to do now. On the solar side, we can say, oh, well, we'll do that. Well, I've done the little math on that, right? It's 350,000 football-sized solar farms. So this is going to be the dilemma, and that's why I think flexibility in terms of the approach of reducing carbon is going to be important. I think the light duty makes a lot of sense. I think medium duty makes a lot of sense. I think the challenge is going to be for some of these larger, until we get the advancements on the battery,
Mm-hmm.
where we don't have 5,000 pounds, batteries on an 18-wheel truck.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the future of mobility, we're talking about a global future. I want to acknowledge the fact that we're also talking very much about the U.S. market. Obviously, there are implications elsewhere, but give me a sense, put this in the context of the global landscape as well. What you're seeing in terms of both the policy in Europe, for example, elsewhere. I mean, how are we doing in the U.S. with regard to the future of mobility? Are we best in class? Are we lagging particular areas of difference you point out?
Well, the major difference, Diane, is that you brought geopolitics before. And I've been in the industry for 25 years. And when you do a development, you used to do it for one technology and then applied across the world. Well, not anymore. Not anymore. So when you start discussing technologies, IP, trademark rights, you have to say where are these coming from, and then you might have double or triple the investment. So that changes significantly the amount of investment that we're deploying, and this is not only Volkswagen, it applies to every single company in this world. So that's one. Then each continent has its own strengths and weaknesses, right? So if you have a country that is highly leveraged on renewable energy, they should go electric. But a country like Poland that relies 80% on coal, unless they can pivot the entire supply grid into renewable, then they should stay longer. So that's why I don't believe that singling out one innovation and technology, each country, each continent will play its own strength. I can tell you that from the European side, when they look at the US and they look at the Inflation Reduction Act, I think they wish they would have an act like the Inflation Reduction Act for Europe, because they're being attacked, they're being bombarded by imports from all over the world, particularly from China, right? And when you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, it's bringing all these jobs, innovation and technology in the US.
Stella, what is enlightened? We talked about the Inflation Reduction Act. You mentioned, of course, the support of China. You're in a lot of other markets. What does an enlightened policy look like right now from where you sit?
Yeah, I think U.S. policy is very good, especially California. CARB did a wonderful job. Even back to 15 years ago, Chinese government came to California, learned the carbon trade like a system, and then they conduct a similar policy back to the country. So I think California is world leading, the most advanced policy. The only problem they have is they did not have a schedule. They have a very beautiful target by 2035. There's all the heavy duty truck need to be electrified or maybe CNG or clean gas. But then they don't have that's the only target. But who cares what happened 2035? The people more care about what's happening next 2 to 3 years. So if you see Canada did a much better job. So then Canada, yeah. By end of last year, they announced their sustainable like a policy.
Right.
So they define by 2026, 20% of the new vehicle need to be electric, green energy vehicle. Now they're discussing what's the ratio for the PHEV, and what's the definition with the battery range will be also considered part of this policy. And then they have every 2 years, they add 10%. So they have for me, is as a company CEO, you always have a target, then you have action plan. So I think Canada learn from California, and then make it a very solid plan. And so in policy-wise, even for the IRA, that's very strong, very good. The only problem they have, they eliminate a Chinese vendor to participate. And actually, if you're talking about from the battery, from the mining, from the all the technology integration, Chinese supply chain now is the leading supply chain, is the best. So why don't allow the U.S. company have freedom to choose the best supply? If they can maybe to be more open for the Chinese vendor, actually this will benefit for the U.S. company, U.S. OEM, and also most importantly will benefit the U.S. consumer. Then they will bring the best technology to the country, most competitive technology to the country. Then everything electrification will happen. Yeah.
But Stella, that's what happens when you ask the American taxpayer to pay for it. I mean, that's who's paying for that. The IRA is not magic money. It's being paid for by the American taxpayer.
That's the reason.
So that's the reason why the rules got through politics. The rules got. Joe Manchin was sitting right up here a couple hours ago. The reason he asked for the things that he had in there is because he recognizes the American taxpayer is going to end up subsidizing China. And he doesn't want it. And that's the problem. That's the problem when you begin to force all of this policy through the government like that.
No, I have different angle. So that's reason, because it's part of my money too. I want my money wealth used to pay the right technology, bring the real benefit to me, not to pay the technology with my money. You never know the technology will work or not. That's the problem.
Well,
So that's the
understand,
U.S.
but, I mean,
why
if you're
U.S.
asking
is.
the American taxpayer to pay for Chinese stuff, that's a problem.
I mean supply chain. They will pay for maybe big OEM, big manufacturing here, or if like, for example, Toyota set up manufacturing here, they become American company. If all the like other company, they come to U.S. market, they put manufacturing here, they are automatically, organically is U.S. company. They pay the tax. They're part of a contribution. Then the money should, because it's our money, we want our money don't waste for the wrong technology. We want our money being well used for the best technology.
So Stella, can I ask a question? I want to actually move to Éric too, because I've got some, especially with your background from Hydro-Quebec and being a global player, but do you anticipate selling in the U.S.? Do you see a scenario where you would be selling BYD in the U.S. anytime soon? Obviously, the policy environment restricts it, but you talk to policymakers. How likely is it that you would sell your products here?
Yeah, we did not have plan to sell in U.S. Yeah.
So you don't have a plan because it's just not likely to happen. Is that right?
Because it's very confusing, like a stage. Yeah.
Right.
We want to because if you see all the country, I was very funny. I heard. No. If you see all the EV adoption, Korea, Japan, US are the three in the top, in the bottom, did not move. The EV penetration in US actually dropped. Like it dropped from 9.8% to 7%-ish. Yeah. So it's the momentum. I think U.S. Consumer, everybody need to figure out.
Okay. So,
but I think the first thing we need to collectively agree is there is an urgency to reduce emissions.
Yeah.
I hope we got a consensus on that. Then it's a very complex question. Dollar came into the figure because people don't want to pay more. But I think we're going to have to be open collectively that it's not going to be a one-pony trick. There's going to be like dozens of solutions, to get there. Microgrid. You mentioned microgrid. Having making electricity with solar panel and battery. That's one solution, but it's not going to address everything. So we're going to, and we need to look at the world too. We look at ourselves here in North America. We all have had electricity for 200 years, but 4 years ago, there was still 1 billion people on the planet that did not have electricity. Now I think we're under 1 billion, we're 900, but there's region in India, there's region in Africa. These people want to have electricity. And unfortunately right now, last year there was 50 coal plants open in the world. Think about that. Mm-hmm. They're producing emission. And it's tough, who are we to say, don't do that? But they want to have electricity. That's the cheapest way to get there. So this is a very complex question, which merit a reflection altogether. But I think we're going to have to be open that the solution will be multiple. And it's not, in the U.S. it may be one thing, in Canada it may be another one, in Latin America it could be something else. But you need to look at the resources you have to, Yeah. And that's why I said earlier, nuclear, in my mind, if you have to have something to firm up a grid, I love solar and wind, but the reality, it's a variable source. The morning that the wind doesn't blow, you don't have electricity. That's the reality. Unless you stock it with the battery, but there's a limit also to what you can stock. So, and it's expensive. So the reality is you need sources. In Canada, we're very fortunate. We have a lot of hydro, but not anywhere in the world we have that. In the U.S. there's quite a bit too, but you need sources that can firm up your grid.
Yeah, so Éric, I want to share some data here. So actually, current electricity cost from solar is less than 3 cents now. And if you add the battery, it's around 5 cents. So the cost is become affordable. Second, for today, if you see the data by mass, you only need to cover 8% of the desert we have. It's enough to supply the global need for the electricity. And the third one, current utility infrastructure doesn't matter from gas or hydro. So the utilization is between 55 to 60%. So because capacity built up by the peak demand, if we put enough battery storage, and then you will improve this efficiency to be 75%. So you already capacity already built. Now just need battery storage to be decentralized battery storage. It's helping solving the like a congestion for the transmission line. Then you can have an intermediate solution. And then the fourth one, sorry, you have wind farm, you have wind, and then you have like a CNG, you have the like a solar. So you have like a thermal, all the technology bundled together, give you sustainable solution for the whole electricity.
I want to give Pablo a chance to speak, Sean, and then I want to give some final thoughts too in terms of the takeaway, because I think there's been some fascinating issues raised, but go ahead.
Yeah, let me piggyback on Eric's comment because he mentioned affordability, right? Yep. And when you look at all these different solutions to reduce CO2, affordability is a key ingredient, particularly with inflation going on around the world. People have the less opportunity to buy new vehicles going forward. That's a fact. So as we think this through, we need to look at different technologies that reduce CO2, and it needs to be affordable. Because if they're not affordable and people will hold to the combustion vehicles for a longer period of time, we're not going to reduce CO2. So you have to look at this in the combination of new vehicles, existing vehicles, and how do we make it affordable for the normal human being.
So I think you get back to your question earlier about what is it going to take? What do we need? I actually think the consumer needs to be brought into this equation a lot more than it has already. So if you think, going back to the Coca-Cola example, well, on everything you consume today, you actually have to see the calorie content. On every vehicle that you buy, you actually have to see the percentage content that was manufactured in the US. So there's stickers, right? So the data that the consumer gets access to allows them to make those decisions. And I think then if we do the same thing with respect to raw mineral content and the sustainability of the mines that the materials come out of, the carbon footprint of that product, whatever it is, the seat on the aircraft or the vehicle you buy or the milk that you take because you buy because it's been carted, all of that carbon footprint, all of that understanding, if the consumer can actually understand that, and then that can be some metric of determination, right? And this is where I believe in government is level of government regulation to ensure that we actually are not bringing in dirty batteries into our country, right? That we are actually focused on minimizing the carbon footprint of everything we consume, and the consumer can actually have a place in that, then I think that's a powerful force.
And blockchain, right? We didn't talk about that, but that's obviously very powerful in the supply chain, and a lot of people are interested in where does this come from. I want to give each of you a chance for some final thoughts, takeaways, investment advice, whatever you want. But give us a sense as to what's on your radar you'd put on ours and what's next. I'm going to start with you.
I think we're all hoping for a better world. Some of us are working for the next generation. What can we do good? I think we're going into a good place. Sometimes it's a bit confusing. This world is a bit confusing. But I think we have good technologies. We have a lot of capital in the world. We have a lot of smart people. So through innovation, I think we can accelerate this transition.
Great. Stella, how about yourself?
So for BYD, we really bet and believe and invest for future, which we believe is electrification. So, but then also when we go to any market, we build our facility. We bring our technology, innovation to every market we went, and then we make ourselves to become more global and localize ourselves. Yeah.
Excellent.
I do believe I'm very optimistic about the decarbonization of goods movement in the country. I happen to think that it will require a little bit more flexibility and it'll take many kind of technologies to get there. But I'm optimistic that we can get there.
Eric?
I think I'm optimistic too. It's going to require a lot of leadership. And leadership will have to come from, companies. Leadership will have to come from government. But I think if we all get organized together and we prioritize what are the right things, there's a lot of possibilities out there, but we'll need eventually to focus to get there. But I think the possibility is there.
I'll echo what everybody else said, very optimistic. On the Kuberg side, I'm excited to share that we are the first, we have an industry first demonstration of lithium metal technology. We're the first company to have had a third party validate a module, a full lithium metal module for aviation applications actually. And so we're making strides even though hardware is hard, but we're making great advances and excited about that.
And let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw in one wild card that came in, which is what technology are you excited about that's not in your own industry with regard to, even with mobility in general, as consumers, because you mentioned consumers, I'm assuming that, what's on your radar that just excites you as an executive, as a CEO? I know AI is one of those things, but anything in particular that you keep your eye on that you think might be applicable to your industry that may not be directly applicable today?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a pilot here in the US, in Austin. It's autonomous driving. I think it's going to be revolutionary. The technology is here. I think AI will accelerate the learnings, machine learning that, we have these vehicles tested on the actual roads of the US. And I think it's going to be a breakthrough for consumers. Because imagine you want to go to the airport or you want to go to Colorado, maybe you take a plane, maybe you take a bus, maybe you drive, or maybe you take an autonomous vehicle for a ride.
Autonomy looks very different now than it did when we first started the discussion. Stella, how about yourself as a business leader, and also you have insight into the innovation picture at what's going on in China. Give us a sense of what's just exciting to you outside your industry.
I think it's AI. Because when we're talking about the AI, this will be really revolution. For example, the AI technology can bring a lot of automation for your production line. Currently, people, like BYD has close to like 900,000 employees. So then we are building a lot of facility. So use AI, maybe we can bring a lot of automation and a very intelligent automation there. And the second, each time we need to invest huge money, take like 3 years to build a new car. So then use AI, we make cut is like a cost to be half, and then can be accelerate developing cycles. So I think AI going to bring fundamental revolution change for the industry, for manufacturing, also for the business, like for the car, auto driving. So that's the next big boom will be AI.
I want to have a digital twin. That's my goal in life.
Yes.
Anything you wanted to mention quickly?
I'm excited. We're fooling around and we're working on being able to take the natural gas stream and split out hydrogen and graphene out of natural gas. And we have so much natural gas in the world. If we're able to do that, and those kinds of technologies come forward,
That's
really
exciting.
revolutionize future transportation.
Yep. Eric?
There's a couple of technology. If ever you have the chance, we have a booth here with what we call the EcoJet. So this is a new reshape airplane, a new shape of an airplane that reduces emission by 20%. So we're actually flying drones.
Very cool looking.
Yeah, it's pretty good looking. You saw that. So it's actually flying as a drone right now. We're testing it, and the result looks very promising. Second thing, I've mentioned SAF. So SAF, it's really push the distribution and the manufacturing to be at the right place and in sufficient quantity. And I'm still keeping an eye on hydrogen, which could be a solution, but there's all kind of safety for an airplane reason that it makes it complex. Battery also. Eventually, I think when we get to solid-state battery, which is about for the same density, it's about 25% of the weight, I think, what it's looking like, or 70%. So this is going to be promising because when you think about airplane, weight matters. So that's the biggest issue for us. If I'm adding weight on an airplane, then you don't even take off. So I need to be able to fly still these airplanes. So those technology will be things we're going to be keeping an eye on.
Great. Shauna, last word to you.
Also on the aviation side, it's interesting. I remember a few CESs ago when there was the big eVTOL, electric vehicle takeoff and landing vehicle, and I thought that is crazy. But now I see the real opportunities here where an aircraft can lift up and then it can turn its propulsion to then go forward. And the opportunities in war zones, in bringing goods to people in very challenged locations where you don't have a runway, that opens up a substantial opportunity to bring goods and people in new places. And so that does require, that has then a domino effect of what's required from a technology perspective, lightweighting materials, and then of course the battery side that I'm so intimately involved in. So it's an exciting time to see these pioneers and really courageous individuals and organizations coming together to bring something new to market.
Great. Well, thank you for that question. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Obviously, this is a discussion
Thank you.
for years to come, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you again.